Returning home for Thanksgiving, I expected family. Instead, I was told to sit at the kids' table, and that single moment rewrote my life. The steering wheel was smooth beneath my palms, but my grip on it was tight enough to whiten my knuckles. Manhattan glittered in my rearview mirror hours ago, and now the highway stretched endlessly through fields that felt both familiar and suffocating. I had told myself this trip was just tradition, nothing more. Yet the moment I saw the road signs pointing toward my hometown, the air seemed heavier. Thanksgiving. Family. Two words that should have felt warm, but instead knotted my stomach like a bad investment. My Mercedes hummed steadily, its polished silver frame catching the low autumn light. It was my small rebellion, my quiet symbol that I'd built a life without anyone's help. I had bought it last spring, after a grueling round of promotions that landed me as a rising financial analyst in Manhattan. And yet, no matter what I drove, what I wore, or what I achieved, I knew that by the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, I'd still be Clara. The one they overlooked, the one who hadn't quite arrived. The colonial house appeared like a postcard from another life. White columns, dark shutters, a perfect porch swing. My parents had always been proud of it, their declaration that we were a family worth noticing. I sat at the curb for a moment, engine idling, staring at the glowing windows. Pride tugged at me. Yes, it was my childhood home. But heavier than pride was the weight of years of judgment, expectations, and the unspoken hierarchy that ruled within those walls. The driveway was already crowded. Daniel's sleek black Lexus, a lawyer's car if there ever was one, sat gleaming in the front. Ethan's family SUV took up the other side, car seats still visible through the tinted windows. Both of their lives seemed so cleanly defined. Daniel, the golden child, never short of a success story. Ethan, the devoted father, always framed as the steady man who carried on the family legacy. And me? I pulled my Mercedes to the curb and parked on the street. Like a visitor. Like I had been doing for years. I gathered myself in the mirror. Dark hair smoothed into a twist, blouse pressed, lipstick precise. I had dressed like I was stepping into a boardroom. Not my parents' house, because it always felt like I needed armor. I whispered under my breath, just get through today. The walk up the stone path was shorter than I remembered. My heels clicked against it, a metronome for my rising anxiety. The front door opened before I even reached it. My mother's voice floated out, warm in tone but cool in substance. Clara, we were wondering when you'd get here. Everyone's already inside. No hug. No pause. Just a quick glance at my coat, my shoes, my entire being, and then a pivot back into the house. I stepped into the foyer. The scent of roasted turkey and cinnamon hit me, layered with the faintest whiff of my father's bourbon. The sounds of chatter spilled from the dining room. Laughter, glasses clinking, the practiced ease of people who knew exactly where they belonged. My father appeared in the doorway, glass in hand, his eyes sweeping over me with a look I'd known all my life. Assessment, calculation, and a faint flicker of disapproval. Still working those long hours, Clara? You'll wear yourself out. I'm doing well, Dad. It's good to see you. He nodded but didn't answer. He didn't need to. The message was the same as always. Daniel and Ethan had brought him pride. I had brought him questions. I followed the trail of voices to the dining room. Crystal glasses sparkled. China gleamed. Silver reflected the chandelier's glow. My mother fussed over the arrangement of flowers, while Daniel leaned back with the self-satisfaction of a man who knew he was admired. Ethan laughed at something his son had said, his wife smoothing the boy's hair. And then, like clockwork, I felt it. That creeping sensation that no matter how polished my shoes or tailored my jacket, I wasn't really part of this tableau. I was the extra piece. The one who parked on the street. The one who had to convince herself to cross the threshold at all. I slid into the nearest empty space, my smile carefully fixed in place. No one looked up. Not right away. And in that silence, the beat before recognition, the pause before the obligatory greetings, I realized the truth. This wasn't just Thanksgiving. It was a performance. One I'd been playing a supporting role in for far too long. And this year, something in me whispered, the script might not go the same way. The dining room shimmered as though it had been staged for a magazine spread. Candles flickered in polished silver holders, casting soft glows across china so fine I was almost afraid to breathe too close to it. The smell of butter and roasted garlic clung to the air, layered with the earthy sweetness of cranberry sauce. Every detail was precise, intentional, curated. And yet, as I stood in the doorway, the perfection fractured against me like glass. Daniel and Ethan had already taken their seats at the long mahogany table, surrounded by partners and children and in-laws who filled the air with laughter. At the head sat my father, bourbon glass tucked possessively in one hand, his expression glowing with a patriarch's pride. My mother hovered, adjusting place cards, smoothing the already flawless tablecloth, orchestrating the evening like the conductor of a symphony she'd rehearsed for months. Then her eyes flicked to me. "Clara," she said, in that practiced gentle voice she reserved for delivering blows wrapped in politeness. "We've had to make a little adjustment this year. Just for space." She gestured toward the far corner of the room, where a folding card table had been set up against the wall. 2 metal chairs and 1 low wooden stool ringed it, mismatched as though scavenged from the basement. Paper napkins, not linen. A small plate of crudité sat in the center, lonely and unremarkable. I stared. "You're serious?" "It's temporary," she assured quickly, eyes darting toward Ethan's in-laws, already seated in places of honor beside him. With so many extra guests, we simply ran out of room. My gaze swept the table. Enough space between each carefully arranged setting to land a small plane. And yet somehow, I was the one pushed to the periphery. Daniel caught my eye. He smirked, a tilt of his mouth that said, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." The same smirk he wore when he'd taken my toys as a child, confident our parents would excuse it. The same one when, years later, he mocked my career as just moving other people's money around. That smug little curve that carried all the weight of favoritism behind it. "You'll understand." My mother pressed, the smile fixed. "It's just for tonight." The words sank like stones. Just for tonight. But wasn't it always? Just for tonight, just this time, just until. A lifetime of small exclusions masquerading as practicality. I moved toward the folding table, each step heavy as though gravity itself had doubled. The flimsy chair groaned when I lowered myself onto it, knees colliding with the underside. The edge of the table bit into my thighs. From this vantage point, the chandelier's glow dimmed, shadows pooling instead. Laughter burst from the main table. Something about Daniel's promotion, a case he'd won. My father clapped his shoulder, pride radiating so fiercely it was almost blinding. Ethan leaned in to share a joke with his father-in-law, his wife's tinkling laughter a chorus line to the evening's performance. I speared a carrot stick from the crudité, chewing slowly, tasting nothing. A cousin's child plopped onto the stool beside me, swinging his legs. "Why are you sitting here, Aunt Clara?" His voice carried across the room, innocent but piercing. Heads turned. Daniel's smirk widened. The humiliation rose hot in my chest, a flush crawling up my neck. My mother's reply came quickly, too quickly. "Because she's kind enough to let the little ones have more space at the main table." Kind. That was the word she chose. Not successful, not independent, not respected. Just kind enough to shrink, to bend, to disappear. I pressed my lips into a smile, though inside I burned. My silk blouse clung uncomfortably where the heat of my skin met the cool fabric. Every clang of silverware, every note of laughter from the long table sharpened the divide, until it rang like a bell in my head. I glanced at my wine glass, stemless, water-spotted, cheap, and then at the crystal goblets glittering on the main table. 2 worlds, separated by a few feet of polished wood, yet spanning a lifetime of dismissal. My fork scraped the flimsy plate, the sound loud to my ears but unnoticed by anyone else. I could have screamed, and I doubted they would have heard me over their chorus of mutual admiration. Daniel raised his glass, catching my father's approving nod. "To family," he declared. The table erupted in cheers, glasses clinking. I raised mine too, though no one noticed. The child beside me giggled, grape soda spilling across the table and splattering onto my blouse. Cold wetness bloomed across the silk, staining the fabric. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Across the room, Daniel's smirk remained, fixed and unbothered. My mother pursed her lips but said nothing. My father didn't even glance my way. The humiliation settled deeper, like ink soaking into paper. And in that moment I knew. This table wasn't about space. It was about placement. About where they believed I belonged. Not at their table. Not among them. On the outside, watching. Always watching. The stain spread like a bruise across my blouse, purple seeping into silk in slow, traitorous petals. The child beside me mouthed a tiny, horrified sorry, and then, like all children trained by adult tension, looked anywhere but at me. I dabbed with a napkin that left lint. Then with seltzer from a sweating tumbler someone had abandoned at the kids' table. The spot only bloomed wider, a flower no one would name. At the long table, my mother's laughter rose a half octave, her I'm managing tone, while she nudged a breadbasket and pretended the catastrophe hadn't happened. Ethan's wife offered the child a wet wipe, leaning over her chair without so much as meeting my eyes. The choreography was flawless. Respond without acknowledging, soothe without seeing. An old family ballet. Everyone, my father said, rising with the gravity of a judge returning to chambers. The chandelier made a crown of light on his steel-gray hair. His bourbon glass caught firelight. The reflection winked against the crystal. Before we carve the bird, he looked to my mother, who nodded. I want to raise a glass to family. To success, to health, to milestones. He pivoted toward Daniel. Your partnership, earned, deserved. We're proud. To Ethan, he shifted his gaze warm. For the new house and those two beautiful maniacs. Laughter, the good-natured kind that says we know each other's edges and love them anyway. Glasses lifted, lips touched rims. The warmth spread like butter across hot bread, easy, inevitable. No one looked toward the corner. My own glass fogged from the seltzer I'd poured onto my blouse. I held it anyhow. It felt better to hold something than to be nothing. My father cleared his throat, seeking momentum. To traditions that keep us steady. A clink chorus answered. I kept my face still, as if stillness were a way of not being hurt. The child beside me tugged a sleeve. Aunt Clara. His voice carried again, innocent bell in a cathedral. The room stilled by some imperceptible degree. Why aren't you at the big table? Because there's only so much room, I could have said. Because grown-ups make strange maps, and I'm always on the edge of the page. Because I learned to stop asking for the chair that was mine. I patted his hand instead. I'm okay here. Across the main table, Daniel smiled the smile I knew. The small, satisfied curve that said, there are orders you follow, and I am the one who benefits. Ethan's expression was gentler, the I don't want trouble look of a peacemaker who will never actually make peace. The toast unspooled. Daniel's promotion again, the client he'd landed. Ethan's renovation. Blood, sweat, and YouTube folks, he joked, and won a ripple of affection. My mother slipped in a comment about a neighbor's daughter engaged to a cardiologist. Such a catch, she sighed, the syllables soft and pointed. The blade in the compliment glinted under the tablecloth. My life. My apartment on the 28th floor, my analyses that moved markets, the nights I fell asleep to the glow of Bloomberg, was framed as empty calories next to a ring. I tried the old tricks. Count the cut crystal facets on the goblets. List in order, the deals I had closed this quarter. Imagine the dashboard of my car, how the leather warms 2 minutes after the engine stirs. It slowed the pulse. It did not stop the ache. Clara, my father said suddenly, and the room turned as one organism toward me. A jolt went up my spine. Recognition landed like a thrown coin. Yes. I heard the practiced brightness in my own voice and resented it. He smiled the kind smile, public, mild. Still working hard in the city. A beat. I kept my jaw easy. I am. Good. His eyes slid past me. The way a person glances at a window to check the weather, and returns to the conversation worth having. Now Daniel, tell us about the appellate strategy. I set my glass down, carefully, as if the table were not collapsible, as if care could rescue dignity. The grape soda had wicked toward my waistband. Cold seeped into skin. I pictured the stain drying into a watermark I'd have to carry through small talk and pie. The child leaned again. Want some of my roll? He split it with 2 solemn hands, offering me the larger half, the tenderest treaty I'd been offered all night. I took it. Thanks, champ. Conversations resumed. The cousins to my left whispered about ski passes. To my right, Ethan's in-laws debated pellet smokers versus charcoal. At the big table, my mother performed guest list algebra. My father rehearsed the anecdote about hiking in Acadia that made him sound rugged and paternal. The clatter of forks, the warm friction of family sound. It all overlapped into what should have been music, and wasn't, not for me. A photographer in my head clicked through slides. The birthday where my cake was store-bought because Daniel's SAT tutor ran long. The graduation where my name mispronounced drew polite claps and my parents were in the lobby taking a call about Ethan's job offer. The wedding where I stood at a far table, cropped from the photos by proximity, not lens. I had kept those memories filed under regret. Tonight, the folder relabeled itself, evidence. Let's plate the kids first, my mother chirped, moving with efficiency that brooked no dissent. Clara, would you mind helping them with the gravy? Little hands. I rose automatically, then paused, feeling the pull of the string tied to my wrist since childhood. Be useful, be agreeable, be small. Ethan's oldest piped up. I can do it. He stood, all coltish legs and boyish pride, and beamed when the ladle didn't spill. A ripple of applause went around. I sank back into the folding chair, oddly grateful for his competence, and a little jealous of how easily applause found other people in this house. Picture. My mother announced once plates settled and steam rose. Chairs scraped. People arranged themselves without thought into a hierarchy practiced over decades. Father at center, mother angled just so. Daniel with an arm around his wife's chair. Ethan lifting a child onto his hip. The in-laws framed by generosity. A cousin waved me over. Clara? Scooting. But when I scooted, the only space left was behind a fern, near the wall, my shoulder half hidden by a splay of green. I smiled anyway. The timer blinked red. The shutter snapped 3 times. Somewhere inside me, a laminate cracked. The turkey arrived then, the skin glistening, and a murmur of reverence went around, as if a monarch had entered. My father carved with ceremony. Plates traveled like fairies, laden and destined, skipping my corner once, then twice, the river of abundance diverted by habit's sandbar. By the time a platter reached me, the good pieces were gone. It felt petty to notice, pettier to care, and still I noticed and I cared. Try the stuffing, Daniel called down the table. Mom nailed it. He didn't look at me but I answered, looks great, to prove I could still speak the language. When my phone buzzed, face down beside the cheap napkin, I glanced. A market alert. One of my watchlist positions had popped after hours. In another life, I would have excused myself to the porch, locked in a quick trade, felt the clean click of competence slide into place. I let it go. I was not going to be the one accused of always on her phone. Not tonight. Tonight I was a body in a chair, a stain drying in the shape of a lesson. Dessert talk arrived like a reprieve. Pie shapes, whipped cream strategies. The child beside me asked, thinking it a polite adult question. Aunt Clara, do you have a husband? A few heads tilted just enough to register the sound if not the answer. No, I said gently. But I have a corner office with a view. He considered this, then nodded gravely, as if I'd offered a dragon by another name. Cool. Something in me loosened and then without drama tore. A quiet stitch. A small internal sound that, if it had been audible, would have been the softest pop. Not rage. Not a storm gathering. Just the surrender of a rope that had been holding weight for too long. I stood, slow enough that the chair didn't scrape. No one at the big table paused mid-sentence. I folded the paper napkin, an absurd act of courtesy to a piece of paper, and set it on the table's edge. In the hallway, my coat hung where I'd left it, second class among bulkier parkas. I slid into it and felt at once encased and protected. My purse strap found my shoulder like an ally who had been waiting. The air outside had that late November bite, the kind that smartens the mind and clarifies intentions. Porch boards creaked the way they always had, announcing departures, but if anyone heard, they mistook it for the house settling. I didn't slam the door. The quiet click was enough. My car flashed its patient welcome, a blink of amber in the dusk. As I slid behind the wheel, the leather caught the warmth of me with uncomplicated acceptance. Hands on the wheel again. The hum of the engine a low promise. I watched my parents' windows glow like hearths in a village I had left. On the street, a drift of leaves tumbled across asphalt, unbothered by where they'd come from, unconcerned with where they fell next. I signaled, habit, courtesy to no one, and pulled away from the curb. No text. No accusation. No speech rehearsed. Just a sentence written without words. I'm done asking for a chair at a table built to exclude me. The taillights cut a red ribbon down the block. In the rear view, the Colonial shrank, then slid out of frame. Ahead, the road opened like a vein of dark glass. I pressed the accelerator, not hard, just enough to feel distance begin its quiet work. The interstate stretched out before me, a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through the silence of night. My headlights carved a narrow path, illuminating bare trees and shuttered gas stations. I had no destination in mind, only the instinct to put distance between myself and the house where I had once belonged. The grape soda stain had dried stiff against my blouse, its sticky outline clinging like proof. My fingers traced it absently as I drove. A brand no one else would notice but me. I could still hear Daniel's laughter, still see Ethan's polite silence, still feel my mother's brisk efficiency as she swept me aside with a smile that asked me not to cause trouble. The city lights faded in the rear view, replaced by emptiness. For the first time all night, I exhaled. The deeper the road swallowed me, the lighter I felt, though the hollowness inside me deepened. I almost didn't notice the neon until it blinked across the windshield. A diner perched on the side of the highway, its sign flickering a tired pink. Open 24 hours. The kind of place where truckers parked for cheap coffee, where no one cared who you were, or why you showed up. I pulled in without thinking. Inside, the air was thick with fried onions and grease. A jukebox hummed faintly in the corner, and the counter stools gleamed with cracked red vinyl. A waitress in a faded uniform poured me coffee before I could order, her pen tucked behind one ear. "Rough night?" she asked, eyes kind but not prying. "You could say that." My voice cracked, so I cleared my throat and added, "Just coffee. Maybe pie." She nodded. "Apples fresh. Pecan too." "Apple," I said, though it didn't matter. I wasn't hungry. I just needed something in front of me, something that gave me permission to sit and not move. Steam curled from the mug. The first sip burned my tongue, grounding me. The pie came warm, crust flaky, the kind of homemade comfort I couldn't remember tasting at home in years. I forked at it slowly, my phone buzzing beside me like an unwanted insect. Text after text scrolled across the screen. "Where did you go? You ruined dinner. Your niece is upset." This was supposed to be about family. My mother, then Daniel. Ethan, more restrained. "You should have stayed. It wasn't that bad." I didn't reply. I scrolled further, all the way back through photos saved on my phone. Family portraits where my image was cropped near the edge. Graduation photos where the spotlight shone elsewhere. Weddings where I was tucked at a back table. A pattern began to emerge. One I had always sensed but never catalogued. Invisible. That was the role I'd been cast in year after year. Tonight wasn't the anomaly. It was the proof. The waitress refilled my cup. "Pie not your thing?" "It's good," I said quickly. I just lost my appetite. She gave me a sympathetic nod, as if she had seen 100 versions of me sit in that very booth. Women with damp mascara, men with crumpled jackets, people fleeing dinners that had soured. "Coffee's on the house," she said and walked away. I stared at the streak of caramelized sugar on my plate, my reflection warped in the silver fork. For the first time, I asked myself, why did I keep coming back? Why was I still playing the role they had written for me, as though it were the only script available? My apartment in Manhattan was filled with awards, framed certificates, deals I had closed that shifted markets. Yet none of that mattered in that dining room, where the only currency was family roles. Daniel the golden boy, Ethan the reliable one, Clara the spare chair at the folding table. Something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the bitter coffee, maybe the cheap neon light flickering outside, but a new thought rooted in me. I didn't have to keep showing up to be erased. I could choose something else. I opened the Notes app and began typing, not answers but a list. A list of boundaries I had never allowed myself to set. No more sitting at the kids' table. No more apologies for existing. No more silence when my accomplishments are ignored. The words glowed against the screen, shaky but defiant. By the time I closed the app, My coffee was cold. The pie had gone untouched, but it didn't matter. I slid a few bills under the plate, enough for the meal and a tip that said thank you without words. Outside, the night air was sharp, the kind of cold that stripped illusions bare. I stood for a moment, staring at my reflection in the diner's glass. The stain on my blouse was still there, but it didn't look like defeat anymore. It looked like evidence. When I got back into my car, I didn't head toward home. I drove toward the city, toward the life I had built that they refused to see. The Mercedes purred beneath me, a steady reminder. I had earned this. Every mile was a reclamation. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what I was leaving behind. The skyline rose like a jagged crown as I crossed back into Manhattan, the bridge lights glittering against black water. I had driven for hours, chasing silence and neon, but now the city pulled me home. For once, that word, home, didn't mean the colonial house I had left behind. It meant this: towers of glass, streets buzzing even at 2 a.m., the apartment waiting for me high above it all. I parked in the garage beneath my building, the Mercedes hum fading into the cavern's echo. In the elevator mirror, my blouse still bore the dried grape stain. I looked tired, but not defeated. There was something steadier in my reflection, a kind of steel I hadn't seen in years. Inside my apartment, the first thing I noticed were the shelves lining the living room wall. Family photos framed in silver. Christmas mornings, graduations, weddings. In each, my smile looked polite, thin, an afterthought at the edge of someone else's story. They had followed me here like ghosts. One by one, I pulled the frames down. My hands didn't shake. I stacked them neatly in a box, the glass clinking softly. In their place, I arranged the plaques from my office, the award for Analyst of the Year, the article where Forbes named me one of the rising 30 under 30 in finance. The shelf looked different when I finished, not cold but honest. For once, the space reflected my life, not theirs. The silence pressed against me, but it wasn't heavy. I brewed chamomile tea, slipped into an old t-shirt, and sat on the couch with my laptop. A blank document blinked back. Without thinking too hard, I typed a title: Boundaries. The list grew quickly. I will not explain my worth to anyone. I will not apologize for success. I will not sit at a folding chair when I've earned a seat at the table. I will not absorb blame for their discomfort. I will answer only when I choose to. I read it twice, then closed the laptop. A simple act, but it felt like laying bricks for something sturdier than what had come before. The phone buzzed. First Daniel, then Ethan, then Mom. Dozens of messages stacked one after another. I forced myself to read them, if only to see the script they still clung to. You embarrassed us. You overreacted. You ruined Thanksgiving. The kids were upset by your behavior. We invited you in good faith, and you walked out. Every line tried to twist the night into my fault, but after the diner's neon clarity, I saw through them. They weren't angry that I left. They were angry that I refused to stay small. I didn't reply. Instead, I silenced the thread and turned the phone face down. For the first time, the buzz of unanswered texts didn't spike my chest with guilt. It felt like freedom. When sleep finally came, it was dreamless and heavy. I woke late, sunlight already filling the apartment. For once, I didn't wake with the taste of dread. Instead, I padded barefoot to the kitchen, brewed strong coffee, and opened the curtains wide. The city was alive below, indifferent but full of possibility. People hurrying to offices, taxis honking, steam rising from grates. Nobody here knew me as the extra chair, the afterthought. Here, I was Clara Bennett, analyst, strategist, a woman who moved markets. I laughed softly, almost surprised by the sound. Another buzz from the phone broke the quiet. This time it wasn't family. It was Nora, my closest friend since grad school, the one who had seen me through brutal exams and worse boyfriends. Drinks tonight? You sound like you need one. I typed back quickly, yes. More than one. The thought of telling her everything steadied me. Not for validation, but because she'd believe me without needing proof. That was rare enough to feel like a luxury. Later that afternoon, I boxed up the last of the family photos and carried them to storage. The elevator ride down felt like lowering a coffin, but instead of grief, I felt release. When I returned, my apartment looked lighter, clearer. The shelves gleamed with brass plaques, the coffee table bare except for my laptop and a half-drunk mug. My space, my story. I checked my inbox. Work emails crowded the top, client updates, strategy meetings, end-of-quarter reports. Comforting in their urgency, because they were problems I knew how to solve. But below them, a chain from my mother sat unopened. The subject line, "We need to talk about last night." For a moment, I hovered over it. Then I dragged it to the archive. Not delete, just out of sight, out of reach. A digital version of what I'd done with the photos. That night, at the bar, Nora listened as I poured everything out. The folding chair, the soda stain, the toast that erased me. Her eyes darkened, her hands squeezing mine. "Clara," she said, "you don't owe them your silence anymore." I knew she was right. As I walked home under the city's hum, the cold air sharp and clean, I realized something had shifted permanently. Last night had been my breaking point, but tonight was the first step of something new. And this time, the script would be mine. The morning after Nora and I closed the bar, I woke to a phone vibrating like an angry hornet on the nightstand. My head ached faintly, but the headache wasn't from Jen. It was from expectation. I already knew who it would be. The family group chat lit up the screen with a flood of unread messages. Daniel's clipped sentences, Ethan's measured guilt trips, my mother's carefully crafted pleas. "We're worried about you. You owe us an explanation. The children don't understand why their aunt left." I scrolled through them with a detached calm, like reading complaints about someone else. It wasn't until I reached the very bottom that one message froze me. From Lily. My niece. 15 years old, Ethan's eldest. Quiet, artistic, often hovering in the background at gatherings with a sketchbook. They make me feel invisible too. Just that. 7 words, no punctuation. My chest tightened. I read it twice, 3 times, unsure whether to reply immediately or sit with it. My instinct was to protect her. My fear was that any response could draw fire in her direction. I tapped slowly. "I see you, Lily. Always. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Then I deleted and retyped, making it simpler. "I understand. I'm here." The 3 dots never appeared. But an hour later, she sent back a heart emoji. I set the phone down and sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the city beyond my window. That one message pierced deeper than all the angry texts combined. It wasn't just about me anymore. A new generation was already learning the script. That thought lingered into the afternoon, even as I tried to bury myself in spreadsheets and projections. By early evening, when the apartment fell into golden light, my phone buzzed again, but not from Lily. The screen showed a name I hadn't seen in years, Aunt Margaret. I hesitated. Margaret was my mother's sister, the black sheep who had disappeared from holidays when I was still in middle school. I remembered whispers about her being too sensitive, selfish, ungrateful. In family lore, she was the cautionary tale. I answered anyway. "Clara." Her voice was husky, older, but steadier than I remembered. "I heard what happened. Your mother called me, trying to spin it into a tragedy about how ungrateful you are. Funny thing is, she used the same words they used on me 20 years ago." I gripped the phone tighter. "You left because I got tired of folding myself smaller to fit a story that didn't belong to me." A pause. Sound familiar? I swallowed. The silence between us was heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was recognition. "They'll make you think you're crazy," she continued. "They'll tell you you're overreacting, that you're selfish. But listen to me, Clara. You're not. You're just breaking a pattern they've depended on for too long." I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. "It feels like I'm losing them." "You're not losing them. You're losing an illusion of what they were supposed to be. There's a difference." Her words settled deep, steadying me. "Margaret," I asked softly, "do you regret it?" Walking away, there was the sound of an exhale, long and thoughtful. "Sometimes. I regret the years I spent thinking I was broken. But I never regretted stepping out of that house. Freedom is worth loneliness, Clara. And eventually, you build a new kind of family." After the call, I sat in the quiet, her words echoing. Lily's message. Margaret's voice. For the first time, I understood that my exile wasn't personal. It was generational. My mother had done it to her sister. Now she was doing it to me. And if I wasn't careful, Lily would be next. I opened my laptop and pulled up the boundaries document I'd started after the diner. I added a new line. I will not let them rewrite my story. And I will not let Lily inherit this silence. Night settled over Manhattan, headlights tracing rivers of light across the avenues below. I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the city pulse with life. Somewhere out there, families were gathering around tables where everyone had a seat. Somewhere, nieces weren't taught invisibility, sisters weren't erased. And maybe, just maybe, I could start to build that for myself. The Monday after Margaret's call, I sat at my desk in the glass tower downtown, staring at the blinking cursor of an unfinished report. Numbers I normally read like poetry blurred into static. Instead of projections, my mind cataloged years of invisible wounds. If the past had been a trial, I suddenly realized I'd been sitting on the witness stand without evidence. No more. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Not to work, but to build a case. I started scrolling through my phone, pulling screenshots of family texts. The patterns leapt out. Daniel's smug dismissals, Ethan's backhanded excuses, my mother's passive-aggressive remarks disguised as concern. Every one of them a thread in the tapestry I'd been suffocating under. I created folders: exclusion, dismissal, gaslighting. Into each I dropped photos, texts, emails. There was the Christmas picture where I'd been cropped at the edge while Chelsea, no Lily's mother, I corrected myself, thinking of Ethan's daughter, sat glowing in the center. There was the wedding email chain that left me out of family seating decisions, my name absent from the reply all. There was the Thanksgiving text from my father praising Daniel and Ethan, but not one word about my promotion. Evidence. Proof. A record that the silence wasn't in my head. The next day, I booked an appointment with Dr. Levin, the therapist Nora had recommended months ago. I almost canceled twice, but by the time I was seated in her office, across from a bookshelf lined with psychology tomes and framed diplomas, I was grateful I hadn't. "You've brought receipts," she said dryly, after I laid my laptop open on her desk. Receipts. I repeated. Evidence. Documentation. Survivors of families like yours often need to prove to themselves that it really happened, that they didn't imagine the neglect. Her words loosened something in me. Exactly. I keep asking myself if I'm exaggerating. But then I look at this. I gestured to the glowing screen. And it's undeniable. She nodded. And what do you want from them? The question rattled me. I thought for a long moment. Respect. Acknowledgement. A seat at the table. Dr. Levin folded her hands. Then you'll need boundaries, and a strategy to communicate them without collapsing under their denial. Families like yours thrive on rewriting history. That night, I practiced in front of the mirror. Calm voice, steady eyes. I imagined my father saying, "You're overreacting." I answered firmly, "No. This happened and here's proof." I imagined my mother sighing, "We never meant to hurt you." I replied, "Intent doesn't erase impact." Each response felt like a muscle I hadn't used in years, trembling but growing stronger with repetition. Later, Nora came over with takeout, kicking off her heels as she spread cartons across my coffee table. Between bites of lo mein, I told her about Lily's text, about Margaret's call, about the folders of evidence. Nora leaned back, chopsticks dangling. "Clara, this is bigger than just you. You're breaking something they've been building for decades. Don't expect them to thank you for it." "I don't need thanks," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I need them to stop pretending I don't exist." We clinked plastic cups of diet soda, a private toast. By Wednesday, the first whispers of their counter-strategy reached me. Ethan accidentally CC'd me on an email chain between him, Daniel, and my parents. Subject line, family meeting. "We need to get ahead of Clara's narrative. She's making this into something it's not. Let's discuss Sunday." They hadn't invited me. I stared at the screen, equal parts furious and vindicated. A family meeting about me, without me. More evidence, I thought, sliding the email into my growing folder. On Thursday, I met Dr. Levin again. She studied me with sharp eyes. How do you feel knowing they're meeting without you? Honestly, I said, relieved. It proves my point. They can't stop excluding me, even while planning how to respond to my exclusion. She smiled faintly. Use that. Don't fight with their story. Bring your own story to the table. Clear, documented, calm. You're not asking permission to exist anymore. You're informing them of the terms under which you'll remain. Her phrasing struck deep. The terms under which I'll remain. For once, I was the one writing conditions. That night, I lit a candle on my dining table. The flame small but steady against the city's roar beyond the windows. I laid out the folders, the notes, the strategies I'd rehearsed. The documents formed not just evidence, but armor. Somewhere in that same hour, I imagined, my family was sitting around a table plotting how to contain me. But I no longer felt small. I no longer felt invisible. For the first time, I felt prepared. The restaurant I chose wasn't extravagant, but it was intentional. Neutral ground. A place with warm wood walls, soft lighting, and a round table in the center of the dining room that I reserved weeks in advance. No corners. No head of the table. Just a circle, where everyone would face each other. I arrived early, carrying a small box of printed name cards I had ordered online. It felt ceremonial, sliding each one into a holder. Daniel, Ethan, Mom, Dad, and one for me, placed directly between them, not on the fringe. I smoothed the tablecloth, adjusted the silverware, and let my pulse slow. By the time the waiter led them in, I was already seated. My father looked unsettled, scanning the roundness of the table as if it were a trick. My mother's lips pressed into a line when she noticed the name cards. Daniel smirked. Of course he did. And Ethan hovered behind, hesitant but compliant. What is this? Daniel asked, voice half amused, half accusatory. A dinner, I said evenly. One where everyone has an equal seat. The waiter poured water. Glasses clinked softly. My mother pulled her chair closer, uncomfortable with the forced symmetry. My father cleared his throat. The sound of a man preparing to reclaim authority. We had our own meeting about this situation, he began. I know, I interrupted gently. I saw the email. His eyes flickered. For once, he had no immediate comeback. I folded my hands on the table. Before we start, I want to set ground rules. One person speaks at a time. No dismissing feelings. No mocking. If that can't happen, then this ends now. Daniel let out a short laugh. You're really turning this into a courtroom, aren't you? I held his gaze. Maybe. But this time, I'm not the one on trial. Silence stretched, broken only by the clink of cutlery as Ethan adjusted his fork. Finally, my mother sighed. Fine. What do you want from us, Clara? I took a breath, steady. Respect. Acknowledgement. And an answer to one question. Why should a grown woman with her own career be treated like a child? The words landed like stones tossed into still water. Ripples of discomfort moved around the table. My father shifted in his chair. Daniel glanced away. Ethan fidgeted with his napkin. I've spent years being seated at folding tables, cropped out of photos, left out of decisions. I continued. You act like it's practicality, space, timing. But it's not. It's a pattern. And I'm done pretending it doesn't exist. Daniel opened his mouth, but I raised a hand. I'm not finished. I pulled a folder from my bag, sliding a few pages onto the table. Screenshots of texts, photos from gatherings where my seat was literally apart. I've kept track. These aren't accidents. They're choices. My mother's face paled as she scanned the evidence. My father bristled, defensive. So you've been cataloging grievances like some prosecutor? No, I said quietly. I've been proving to myself that I'm not imagining this. The weight of those words settled in the air. For the first time, no one rushed to fill the silence. The waiter appeared, sensing tension, and asked if we were ready to order. I nodded toward him. Give us a few more minutes. When he left, I leaned forward. This isn't about food. It's about whether this family can treat me as an equal. If the answer is no, then I'll stop trying to sit at your table. I'll make my own. Daniel's smirk faltered. Ethan rubbed his temples. My mother's hands trembled around her water glass. You're making this sound so dramatic, my father said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. I met his eyes. No, I'm making it honest. Another silence fell, this one heavier. For the first time, I didn't shrink inside it. I let it sit, a presence larger than all of us. And then slowly, they began to speak. The silence stretched so long I thought they might stand up and leave. But then my mother's voice broke through, soft and brittle. I never saw you as complete, she said, eyes fixed on her napkin. Not without a husband. Not without children. I thought if I pushed you, if I reminded you what you were missing, you'd find it. Her words sliced deeper than any outright insult. Not complete. As if the hours I'd poured into my career, the life I'd built, still left me unfinished. I forced myself to keep my face steady. So you dismissed me until I conformed? She didn't answer. Her silence was answer enough. My father leaned back, shoulders squared as if bracing himself. A career isn't family, Clara. What you do, it's numbers. Deals. Paper. Success is measured in people, in legacy. Your brothers gave us that. You haven't. Heat climbed my neck, but I didn't flinch. So because I don't have a husband or children, you decided my accomplishments don't count? He met my gaze, unblinking. That's how I was raised. That's how I measure it. The honesty stung, but it was honesty at last. Daniel cleared his throat, eyes darting between us. Fine. You want truth? I downplayed you because it made me feel superior. You always had something I didn't, drive, independence. When you won awards, I made jokes so I didn't have to feel like I was behind. And Mom and Dad never corrected me, so why wouldn't I keep doing it? His confession landed like a blow I hadn't expected. My golden brother, smug in his perfection, admitting envy. I searched his face for sarcasm, but found only discomfort. Ethan spoke last, his voice quiet. I saw it happen. I saw them leave you out, laugh off your success. And I stayed quiet because it was easier. Because I didn't want to be next. And I hate myself for that. The table was still. The circle had become a confessional booth. For the first time, the truth wasn't hidden under polite smiles or mocking jokes. I breathed slowly, steadying myself. Do you realize what all of that did to me? Do you understand what it's like to sit at the kids' table at 29, to hear a toast about family success, and know it doesn't include you? No one spoke. But for once, they didn't look away. I set my palms flat on the table. Here are my conditions if you want me to remain in this family. Respect, equal treatment, acknowledgement. That means no more folding chairs, no more invisibility, no more jokes at my expense. If you can't do that, then I'm done. My father shifted as if to argue, but my mother placed a hand on his arm. Daniel stared into his water glass, face tight. Ethan nodded faintly, shame heavy in his eyes. The waiter returned, hovering with a polite smile. Are we ready to order? For the first time all night, I smiled back. Yes, we are. I ordered first, my voice calm, steady, claiming the space I'd been denied. The others followed, subdued, their words quieter than before. As the waiter left, I sat back in my chair, feeling the strange weight of both confrontation and release. The cracks had formed. Maybe the wall would never fully fall. But I had finally forced light through it. And this time, I wasn't invisible. 1 year later, the city woke with that shy, golden light November sometimes grants as a truce. It poured through my windows and spread itself across the oak table I'd had delivered 2 days earlier. 12 feet long, one piece. Edges softened by a craftsperson's patient hands. No leaf to extend and no head to claim. My rules from wood grain to place settings. I rolled the linen runner down the center and set out the small brass place card holders I'd chosen because they looked like commas. As if this dinner were a sentence we could keep rewriting. The cards were handwritten. My handwriting, not a calligrapher's. Names without hierarchy. No kids' table. There would never be a kids' table in my home. The elevator chimed, and a moment later Lily burst in, arms wrapped around a bag of apples almost as big as she was. You said I could help with pie, she announced, already toeing off her boots. She's taller now, hair a little shorter, eyeliner a little bolder. Her confidence has grown like a plant finally moved to a sunny window. You're promoted, I said, tying an apron around her waist. Head of pastry. She grinned, then lowered her voice. Aunt Margaret's on her way. She brought the old family recipe for cornbread dressing. The one Grandma pretends never existed. I laughed, a soft, incredulous sound at how ordinary our conspiracies had become. In the year since I walked out of the Colonial, Margaret and I had built a quiet bridge. Morning texts, weekend coffees, a handful of memories restored to truth. Sometimes breaking a cycle is loud. Sometimes it's a series of gentle, stubborn choices. We peeled and sliced, the kitchen filling with cinnamon and butter, and the low-thrum music Nora curated for food prep with feelings. My best friend arrived with flowers and a bottle of champagne she insisted was for kitchen courage. She leaned against the island, studying me over the rim of her glass. How's the pulse? Steady, I said and meant it. No adrenaline spike, no bracing. Just anticipation shaped like gratitude. At noon, the doorbell rang again. Ethan stepped in first, juggling a casserole and a toddler, his wife close behind. He smelled like cold air and nutmeg. We hugged. Tentative last year, easy now. He set the casserole on the counter and looked at the table. No head seat, he observed. No head, I said. No foot. Just us. Good. He smoothed his tie as if smoothing something in himself. I brought the candied yams the kids bullied me into doubling. Daniel arrived next, solo, a step slower than his swagger used to be. He'd texted a week ago to ask if I could look over an investment scenario, and had included a line that mattered more than the spreadsheet. You were right about last year. I'm trying to be different. Today he carried wine and humility. I accepted both. My parents came last, the elevator doors parting like a curtain on the second act of a cautious play. My mother held flowers. My father held nothing, his hands awkward, his eyes combing the room for status and finding only warmth. He took in the long table, the single plane of it, the absence of hierarchy, and something in his shoulders changed. Less iron, more breath. Your home is beautiful, he said. It wasn't a line. The words landed cleanly. Thank you, I answered. Coats in the bedroom, flowers in the sink, we're running on Clara Standard Time. A beat. Which is on time. We worked together without choreography but with care. Ethan whisked gravy while Lily taught my mother how to crimp the pie edge with her thumbs. Margaret showed Daniel how to fold sage into cornbread so scent and memory mingled. Nora and I drizzled honey over carrots and laughed too loudly at a joke that 3 years ago would have been swallowed. My father hovered at the periphery until I handed him a task. Plates, I said, nodding toward the stack. You're in charge of the count. He accepted the assignment with an almost imperceptible relief, a man grateful to have a job he couldn't ruin with rhetoric. When we finally sat, the city lay beneath us like a muted constellation. Bridges glowing, taxis threading, steam lifting. I glanced around the circle and let the picture imprint. Lily between her parents, Margaret beside my mother, Daniel across from me. My father not at the head but adjacent, his chair equal to the rest. Everyone's name card identical. I set my napkin in my lap. I'd like to say a few words, my father began, then stopped, glancing at me. If that's all right. I could have insisted on going first. I didn't need to. Go ahead, I said. He cleared his throat, the way he always had before announcements that used to make my stomach knot. Last year I measured success with a yardstick I never thought to question. I was wrong, he said simply. I'm learning a different measure. No thunderclap, no redemption monologue, just those sentences solid as chair legs. My mother reached for his hand. And I'm learning too, she said, on the inhale rather than the exhale, as if catching courage mid-breath. About completion. About who gets to define it. Across the table, Daniel lifted his glass a few inches. I'm practicing shutting up when I want to deflect, he said wry. Progress, not perfect. Advice on the refinance later. I smiled. After dessert. Ethan looked at Lily then at me. I'm practicing not staying quiet, he said, and the gratitude in his glance needed no translator. Lily squeezed his fingers, then met my eyes with a private flash of triumph. We ate. Conversation moved like a tide, not the riptide of past gatherings, but the easy wash and pull of people listening as much as speaking. My father asked me about a deal I'd closed. He didn't mask confusion with condescension. He asked questions, then nodded slowly, a man catching a new language. My mother complimented the balance of spice in the carrots, and asked if Lily's art teacher took visitors at the spring show. Daniel, halfway through a story, stopped himself and said, "Wait, Clara, what do you think?" I thought a lot, and I said so, and nobody rolled their eyes. When it came time for a toast, I stood. I didn't raise my glass high, just enough. "To the table," I said. "The one we build and rebuild. The one that doesn't shrink anyone to make room for someone else." Glasses met with a soft, crystalline chorus. I took a sip and let the wine warm my mouth, then my chest. Later, after pie and coffee and the first casual jokes about leftovers, Nora tugged my sleeve and tilted her head toward the hallway. "Pulse check." "Still steady," I answered. The old ache hadn't arrived. In its place, a hum, quiet and right. I looked back at the table, at Lily laughing so hard she lost her breath, at my father telling Margaret a story, and actually listening to the interruption, at Daniel passing bread without performing generosity, at Ethan's hand on his wife's shoulder, at my mother catching my gaze and not looking away. "Your house feels like consent," Nora said, half teasing but not wrong. Like every chair asked permission to be here, and the answer was yes. "That's the point," I said. "No more chairs that wobble." As dusk deepened, coats reappeared, hugs stacked up like plates, promises were made, small ones that might hold. At the door, my father hesitated the way men do when what they want to say isn't a thing they were taught. "Thank you for the job," he said finally. "The plates." I smiled. "The job of showing us where the table belongs." I didn't rescue him with a speech. "You did your part," I said. "That matters." After the elevator doors closed on the last wave, quiet settled, not empty, simply spacious. I walked the perimeter of my home, collecting water rings, straightening a fork, grounding myself in the mundane. Lily's apple peels curled in the compost bin like ribbons. The brass commas of the place cards gleamed. I stood at the headless table and pressed my palm flat to its surface. The wood held some heat still, absorbed from a day of hands and plates and leaning elbows. I thought of last Thanksgiving, the folding chair biting my thighs, the grape soda stain, the hush of leaving. I thought of the diner's neon, the notes app list titled Boundaries, Margaret's phone call, Lily's text, every small practiced sentence that rebuilt a spine. Outside, the skyline continued its indifferent glitter. Inside, my apartment breathed like a living thing. No kids' table. No head. No test to pass before a chair is earned. This is the part they don't tell you. The miracle isn't that the family changes. It's that you do. You stop auditioning for a role you never wanted, and take ownership of the stage. You choose the set. You choose the light. You choose the table. I blew out the last candle and watched smoke braid itself upward, then disappear. My phone vibrated once, a new message from Lily. "Best Thanksgiving ever. Next year I'm bringing salted caramel. Your head of pastry," I typed back. "Your rule stands." I slid the phone into my pocket, turned off the lamp, and let the room hold its soft dark. The table waited in the center, long and equal, ready.